11, and I think I got home a little under an hour ago from my last stop on this internet project. So I wanted to talk to you all about the internet. So when we first had to go home from school, I had already before that had in mind to do a project for Dunnigan, California in the Campers Inn mobile home park there to install a computer lab and like basketball and stuff for after school in the fall. So when this came up, then I just moved that computer program to now so that we can help get our students connected. And I was trying to start and where there was, I thought, better internet, maybe in Arbuckle and less coverage in Dunnigan and so forth. So I had the product in mind already, but then also starting with what I thought was a higher need at the time. So to do this, I brought Dante. Well, first I researched all the coverage, which carriers might have coverage in those areas, in that area, and then narrowed it down to two, to see who we could get the better deal from, which were T-Mobile and Verizon at the time, and I was able to get the better deal from T-Mobile. So I ordered a SIM card from them and then just brought Dante with me in the pickup. I'm driving around site to site in the mobile home park there and just asking Dante, okay, does it work at that site? You know, drive to the next one. Does it work at that one? Okay, drive to the next one. Does it work at that one? Just like that the whole time to see if there was enough coverage in there from T-Mobile to be able to connect those residents. And there was like 42 mobile homes. And there was, and so then I ordered 50 SIM cards from T-Mobile, which turned out not to come. I was routed to a call center in the Philippines. Anne in the Philippines was her name, and she did the deal for 50 SIM cards initially, but was shut down over the coronavirus and had to go home. So right away, like 2 came, and we're waiting for the other 48 or 7 with the tester. And so in the meantime of waiting, it started collecting smartphones from the community because I knew I was going to put the new SIM cards in the old smartphones like this to be able to use as a hotspot to a device. And turned out that those SIM cards were not sent and were not arriving, but we didn't find out for a while. But in the meantime, I'm noticing that some people had internet perhaps, but didn't have a device or didn't know how to hotspot. And I had like 2 extra lines and some devices around to be able to work in the meantime on this. So I just went around with Dante, was my tech guy. We were just doing porch drop-off or training like that and making progress on that in the meantime of waiting. So that's being successful. So we're making our way like to Arbuckle where there's Frontier. So in the meantime, Dante, I'm waiting on the SIM cards, and I'm starting to. Eventually, I got around to Anne in the Philippines. I found her in India from another third-party call center who was able to direct message Anne, but it turned out that no U.S. agent could see what the original deal was and stuff because they were third party. So I had to start all over with the U.S. A person who was based in the U.S. from T-Mobile and got I think 13 SIM cards. And it came a couple of weeks later for the original deal, but had made a lot of progress in the meantime. So dealing with the residents of Dunnigan, Campers Inn, some of those outlying streets, and then moving my way toward Arbuckle, where I'm learning that people had Frontier internet service, but that did not necessarily mean that they had internet. So even though they had been subscribing to Frontier for years, maybe the service was working less than half of the time, and so there was not just a high need for people who did not have any type of internet at all, but also for people who were subscribers of an internet service. And so I'm learning that as I go. So during the daytime, once I got my class connected, and in the meantime working on getting my class connected, answering parent messages and all that kind of stuff, and doing teacher stuff during the day, then from 6 to 10 p.m. at night, I'm going site to site to site, working on the internet. And then I'm learning that this is that rural areas are talking about their provider. Like we could talk about Frontier, maybe not as bad as we talk about Frontier, but I'm realizing this is a rural issue in a sense. And so I'm doing research at night from 10 p.m. to like 2 a.m. learning all about the internet and rural internet and all this kind of stuff. So that's when I discover that there's this mapping called census block mapping, where if one person on a block has internet, the entire block is counted as having internet, which if you live rural, then you know you don't even have internet from the kitchen to the living room in a single site, right? So that census block mapping was found to skew the maps by as much as 40%, which was first discovered by the state of Georgia, who realized the maps were off and started doing their own mapping site to site and by survey, and that's when they realized it was 40%, as much as skewed by as much as 40%. And then other states surrounding Georgia also picked up on this and started doing their own mapping. And why the mapping matters is because the FCC relies on this mapping to determine the need for coverage for dispersing funds, millions and billions of dollars, to internet providers who are able to provide rural broadband connectivity. They're using the maps to determine the need for coverage to disperse the funds. So if the maps are skewed, then there's not funding going to certain areas that are still in need, right? So I got curious about what all that funding was and where it went and where did it work, because I want to know, well, did it work? Which carriers took advantage of it? Were they able to install broadband in rural areas? Did it work? Who solved this? And so I wanted to see all of that. I wanted to see where there's been success, but also got curious about Frontier in California. So there's a map where you can check which of the U.S. and you can go state and region and town and whatever, and you can put in which carriers and which funds. So I put in Connect America 1 and Connect America 2, which were the last 10-12 years of federal funding for the rural infrastructure, to see what was dispersed to who, and put in Frontier specifically for California specifically, and learned that in the past 4 years, Frontier has absorbed $140 million from that Connect America 2 fund, and claims to have done deployments in Arbuckle, on Wire Road and Elm Road, and some really rural. I was joking about the cemetery earlier today in Elm Road, so I was thinking that that's another issue with this with this federal funding, is that it's by self-reporting. So a carrier can absorb the funds and then just report on what they say they did with those deployments. And they do have to provide an address, but I don't know who's really checking on those. So Connect America 1 and 2 ended, and it was not renewed. Instead, it was in February, they finalized and published Rural Opportunity Fund, which replaces Connect America 2 and is the same thing, but a new name. It doubles down on the money and does not address the mapping issue or the self-reporting issue. And so they're doubling down on money that they know doesn't always go where it's supposed to go. I'm tracking that down. So in terms of Frontier, there, of course, there's horror stories about Frontier. Just recently, there's horror story of myself dealing personally with families who had a mom who was calling in to get Frontier's low-income rate, which there's a low-income rate for Frontier at $20 a month. They obscure that program, but it does exist, so she's calling in to ask about it, and they accost her and they say, how do you even know about that program, who sent you, and all this kind of stuff. And then she's just trying to get her kids connected to the internet for school, right? And then they send her to this voicemail, leave a voicemail, and that doesn't work, but she persists. And then finally they say, we'll send you a link to your email, which of course, if we're getting internet, probably we didn't have email, right? But she worked it out, and then get a link to your email and log into this portal with this password, and then you'll be able to get the program. And then the portal password thing didn't work, so she had to call back in again. And now if they finally gave her the rate, and it was supposed to be $20 down and $20 a month, ended up $40 down and $20 a month. So just in that 3 or 4 days of phone calls back and forth, the deposit amount doubled. And she was scheduled 10 days out to have an install, and they came on the day of install and told her phone jack was bad and left. So she followed up in a few days, and they rescheduled her for an install a week later than that, which has yet to be installed. So it was 17 days from the original day of being scheduled, not originally calling, but the original day she was scheduled. 17 days later, still not installed. Still who knows how long out. And then another but already paid, right? And then another person who called in for her to get connectivity for her son when school first got out, who qualifies for the low-income programming but didn't realize it existed, and they gave her the regular rate, and she heard about it. She called back in to ask about the lower rate, and they said, oh, it's really bad, it's really slow, you know, you wouldn't want that at all. And so when I'm sitting and talking and seeing families struggling who are Frontier, who have already been Frontier subscribers for a long time, or who are getting these kind of runaround things, it makes you sick when I'm reading reports at night about all the millions of dollars and what they say they've done. And I'm really picking on Frontier, although they're not the only provider that does this, especially if you talk to other rural people, whoever their rural provider is, you might hear some similar complaints, maybe not as bad. But it just makes you sick, right? Because you're in people's kitchens, you're on their porches, you're working for hours and hours training families and kids on different devices. Because, like, if they had an Apple device, is different than if they had an Android device, because our school apps work a certain way with each device, and then which carrier they had or what I was bringing them and how all that works together. So from one house to another, I might have a different solution. So I'm driving around in my pickup with SIM cards, okay, and old smartphones I collected from the community, and my son, and a pile of iPads and stuff are like in a dish rack thing like this, and chargers and cords, and, like, you know, because I had to learn how to take apart these and learn each different kind of device and what year, what model, what it could do, and could it do hotspot, was it locked, was it unlocked, all this, what kind of charger does it take, like all this tech stuff. So I'm doing all this work myself, but then I'm hearing all the angst of the families who have been trying to get connected for a long time. They've all called different various carriers. They've especially been calling Frontier, or have already had Frontier. And then I'm hearing about how fiber was installed in the Honeygroves and in Tim Lewis homes by the developers. So that means at some point Frontier linked into that fiber, because people are being charged for fiber. And does that mean then that there was fiber here all along, that anywhere from the little service hut in the old jail, you know, to those developments, people could have been linked into fiber? And then the difference between maybe a business account who hasn't had an interruption in service to a residential account who has nothing but interruptions in service, it just makes you sick to do all that work and to talk with all those families and hear all their experiences, and their hearts are breaking. They're living in fear because they had to go home to telework, and they're supposed to be doing Zoom meetings and stuff, and they subscribe to the internet for over $100 a month even in some cases, but it's not working. And then or they have to go home from their job because they lost their job and file unemployment online, but there's no internet, you know, all of that. And then see these reports of $140 million in 4 years, and claiming to deploy to Arbuckle. Someone needs to be held accountable, but also we need to get away from Frontier and get a better provider. If you are local and you have Frontier experiences, please report them to the FCC. The FCC forwards the complaint to Frontier, and the Frontier has to follow up, which isn't probably a positive result, but at least there'll be some records of that. There are some people in Southern California who are in a class action right now against Frontier because they were previously Verizon clients, and Frontier purchased a section of Verizon fiber at the time, and those Frontier clients Verizon clients were promised gift cards and this and that to stay with Frontier or to renew with Frontier once their thing was up, and it never happened. They were double billed, all kinds of billing problems, and so people who were previously Verizon fiber customers who were bought out by Frontier have a class action right now in California against Frontier. Frontier itself filed for bankruptcy, and our local infrastructure is actually owned by AT&T, and with a 100-year contract to Frontier. So if Frontier goes bankrupt but is not bought out or bailed out, we are defaulting to AT&T to service us, which they've made clear they don't want to service our area. And even there is a wireless AT&T tower here, but it's been down since February. So I've even served people with Hotspot Way who are subscribers to AT&T wireless because their wireless wasn't good enough to serve as a hotspot or do the lessons, so like for school. So AT&T we can't really look to AT&T once we lose Frontier, but we should lose Frontier. We should do what we can to get away from Frontier. The short-term solution is wireless. The hotspot way is working, and maybe that means you have more than one hotspot in the home or an extra wireless phone line in the home, etc. But that is working. And make sure you have an unlimited plan so you're not having overages for data if you're able to do it. And long-term, though, fiber. I don't see why we can't install our own fiber. We have lots of adept local people who can. It's just a tiny fibers, tiny glass. It's in some sheathing and then in a conduit. Most of it's less than an inch in diameter. So the cut for that to just bury it is not very wide at all, under 2 inches, even going across the road. So I don't see why we can't install our own fiber, because when I look at budgets that are trying to get funded, usually about 70% of the budgets are the labor and installation and stuff. So I don't see why we can't install our own fiber and then try to attract a quality fiber provider, right? And so Google Fiber is out there. Google Fiber, if you're listening, they are working on connecting rural communities, and what I found was 100,000 people, though, but it was in Huntsville, Alabama, and that worked for Huntsville, Alabama, for Huntsville as a city to install their own fiber and then have Google Fiber service it. So I don't see why we can't do something like that here. Also, if there is a quality provider who is eligible for the rural opportunity funds that come available in October, and someone local can dream up a fundable project to help get us fiber or at least better broadband, there could be a carrier out there that would be happy to take on that project with those federal funds, right? So I think there are solutions out there. If you are a rural community and you need help with hotspotting wirelessly from carriers that are in your area, please reach out to me. I can train you and you can duplicate what I'm doing. If you are a local person and you're a Frontier subscriber, please report everything to the FCC. Please also write Congressman Garamendi, Assemblyman Gallagher. Aguilar Curry is sympathetic to our rural issues. She's working on telehealth. She's working on rural internet issues and ed. And thank you to California Superintendent Tony Thurmond for bringing together, facilitating the Digital Divide Task Force, which he put together to bring internet heads together to try to negotiate something for devices and connectivity in a package. But I would say to that, please know your communities that you're serving. Some communities do have devices and they just need the connectivity. So I know you're negotiating device connectivity package, but maybe you can look at just getting some hotspots to some of these rural places that already have, for example, one-to-one Chromebook technology. Like our district, we have 1,200 students. We have one-to-one Chromebooks. We just need hotspots. So, and every community is contextual, right? So I think my advice in all this journey is to get to know your people, know your community, do things boots on the ground. Definitely don't rely on the FCC maps, but also coverage maps from carriers are not accurate. For example, for us, T-Mobile was the wireless solution, but T-Mobile in Dunning didn't show us having coverage. But boots on the ground, they do have coverage. So get out there and drive to some of these sites and check for coverage yourself. So if you are a rural community, has solved it, please reach out to me. If you are a rural community that needs help, please reach out to me. If you're a carrier that can help us, please help us. Please reach out to me. If you're a legislator listening, I hope you hold Frontier accountable, and I hope you're able to meet the need of these rural students. And we should note that it's not just an ed issue right at the moment, and it's not a low SES issue at the moment. It's a everybody issue. Low SES or not, professionals are even subscribing to internet and not having internet. It's also a medical issue. It's also a livelihood issue. It's an everything issue. So I see right now internet as a basic human right. Education, housing, food, and internet. So if there's advocacy groups out there, if there's someone who knows who we can talk to get us rolling, please let me know. And I just want to talk to you tonight about all that's been going on with the internet project. If you're a local family, I'll get to you, or I'm working to get to everyone in Arbuckle so that every resident has quality, consistent internet access, not just now, but also into the future. Okay, thanks guys. See you later.